Awesome. Okay. So let me share my screen with you really quickly. Let me see here. All right, hopefully you all can see it. So today's workshop, you landed an interview. Now what? Tips for a successful interview. Let me see here. Okay. So today's workshop might not go the full hour, so no worries. But today's workshop, we're going to cover why are we even having this workshop, steps on how to prepare for your interview, what to do post-interview, and then open up for Q&A if you have any questions. And how do let me see, there we go. Okay. So why are we even having this workshop? As I mentioned just a minute ago, right now we're in the process of, well, not us, but employers are in the process of reviewing applications for our STEM core summer internships. So students may be getting contacted very soon about setting up an interview. But this also is just in general for students to note. I am a student support specialist for those who don't know me, and I have been in constant feedback with students and also employers. And just recently, especially, I've had the ability to connect with employers that have been taking on student interns, who have been interviewing them and doing all that process. And the employers have been just really kind enough to share feedback. While this is only, a couple of employers that I've been meeting with and talking to about things, I think that points that they made really just apply in general to a lot of our students and just to helping to prepare that you guys put your best foot forward. So that's one of the main reasons for this workshop. And then another thing to keep in mind, this isn't just for, your internship interview, but just interviewing in general. And honestly, it never hurts to refresh your skills of interviewing, just as it never hurts to refresh your resume and all that good stuff for resume writing. It's just good practice. So that's the main reason why we wanted to do this workshop for our students. All right, so starting off with research. It is always a good idea to make sure that you know who your audience is, okay? Do your best to research the company that you are applying to by making sure to check out their website. Many companies have LinkedIn profiles, so I would recommend checking out LinkedIn. The cool thing about LinkedIn is that with a lot of these companies having like their LinkedIn profile set up, a lot of times you can actually go in and see current employees or past employees that work there. So, it also opens up for networking opportunities because you can always connect with these people via LinkedIn. So that's always a good idea to do. With LinkedIn, a lot of employers also share maybe like relevant like news information regarding their company or projects that they've worked on. So again, just a really good place to do some research about companies that you are applying to or going to be interviewing with. I highly recommend you look into the company's history, mission and values, and again, just recent projects or work that they do, because it's also if you do need like some sort of icebreaker or something a little extra to add into your interviewing time, that's always kind of good to have on hand, the knowledge of like, oh, I know that they've been working on this huge project. Let me ask about that. So again, just do your homework and do your research. Also, I apologize. If you have questions that pop up throughout the workshop, feel free to write them in the chat and then we can go over them at the end. Review. You want to make sure that if it's available, review the internship description that you are applying to, or in general, like a job description. Go over those position descriptions Just because when you're going over these descriptions, you can zone in on key terms or even similar experiences that you may have that the company is looking for. And again, just kind of already having it in your head, oh, I know that this company is looking for, an intern who has experience with, I don't know, AutoCAD or something, or they have experience with lab research skills. Having that knowledge beforehand and knowing what they're looking for, if you already have that experience, you want to make sure to speak to it in your interview. If for example, I know that for our summer internship opportunities, you don't necessarily know what position you're applying to. That's okay. What I would recommend you do is, again, still go to the company website. And a lot of companies, what they do is if they take on interns, they usually have some sort of page where they talk about the internship programs that they have, or they may highlight stories. They might do like little news pieces on their website where they share the experiences of their interns. So if you're able to look through those things and kind of see what those past interns did while they were there at this company, that's also some good knowledge to have. And again, questions that you can bring up later in your interview. You also want to make sure to review your resume. Again, this might kind of seem like, well, of course I would review it, but you wouldn't believe, but some people don't. And, I feel like, some people want to admit, some people don't, but when you get an interview, it could be nerve-wracking, and the nerves can sometimes get the best of you, and things that you feel like, okay, yeah, I'm fine, I got this. Sometimes because the nerves are kind of so strong, you tend to forget things. So you want to make sure that you review your resume and highlight your key skills. What I do when I have an interview, I literally print out a copy of my resume. I go through with either a highlighter or a pen or something. And again, I kind of either star like bullet points that are like the really good ones that I want to make sure I touch upon, whether it be like projects I worked on, or like a key responsibilities that I have, or things that, like I said, match what the company that I'm applying for is looking for. So key or highlight or star these bullet points that you want to make sure you touch upon in your interview. And also, just as you're going through your resume, make yourself feel good about yourself. Remember why you think you would be a good fit for this company. And when you are at your interview, whether this be virtually or in person, take a copy of your resume for reference. Every interview that I have had, and I've never had a problem doing this, I always take 5 copies with me. If it's in person, I always print out 5 copies of my resume. I always have 4 that I have just ready to go to hand out to them. Here's, thank you for meeting with me today. Here's a copy of my resume in case you don't have it, or, here's just a copy of my resume. And then I keep the one that I have my notes on for me in front of me. Again, I've interviewed at several places and I've never had an issue with people telling me like, oh, you can't have that with you. They've never had an issue with it. So, and if your interview is as virtual, then again, even more of a reason to have a copy of your resume in front of you. And then also have a pen and paper, or if you just want a pen, because you can always write on your resume, have a pen with you to take notes, or, that may come, or questions that you may have that kind of come up as you're interviewing, or they're asking you questions. That way, again, you don't forget or you get flustered and, you don't ask these things. So make sure you have, again, a review internship description, and then have that resume handy. Prepare. You really don't want to miss an opportunity. And this is something that I think the employers that I've met with, especially recently, have really kind of all mentioned. You don't want to miss an opportunity to ask questions or just look prepared. Have 3 to 5 questions ready to ask in your interview. from every single employer that I've talked to, every single one has noted to me whether a student had questions at the end or they didn't. And they said, no, I'm fine. I can tell you right now, every employer that I've talked to has said, wow, I was really impressed by the questions that your student had lined up for me. Wow, I was really impressed about, I remember just recently we had a student interview, and the student at the end of their interview asked the interviewer, if you don't mind, would you let me know what strengths or what was it? Something about his strengths that maybe stood out to them, or what characteristics are you looking for in a person in this position to have? So again, just having those things ready, it really does make a difference. And I'm in all honesty, completely serious. All of these employers definitely noted that and took it as a major plus of that student interviewing. They saw it as that student being very prepared and very professional. So again, I would highly recommend research potential interview questions specific to the position and industry. Again, if you don't necessarily know, for example, for the STEM core internships, you might not know what position you're getting, then at least, again, do your research on the company and the things that they do, or even just general questions that you can ask. And then you want to make sure that you also practice answers to common interview questions. I feel like in every interview I've had, I've always had those kind of typical questions like, tell me about yourself and why you're interested in this role, or what are your strengths and weaknesses? And even though I know that there's a very high probability that they're going to ask me that, sometimes I have not prepared, and those are the moments that I get flustered. And those are the moments when I don't necessarily have or come up with the best answers, because I haven't really taken the time to do my homework and prep for these questions that, again, are very common, but always seem to be asked. So, and again, in regards to strengths and weaknesses, I've interviewed a lot of students, and I can tell when I get a student who has really thought about this, and the different strengths and weaknesses that they give are really, they're not the typical answers. And it's really nice and refreshing to hear. So again, I get it from employers that they can tell the difference between a student who is prepped and a student who hasn't. Okay, so here are some interview question examples, and I'm going to make sure that I'm going to send out the recording for this workshop, but I'm also going to send out a link to a article that it's kind of like my go-to, really. It has a whole bunch of different questions broken down by like different categories that an interviewee can ask an interviewer. But these are kind of just a couple that I picked out. So can you elaborate on the day-to-day responsibilities that this job entails? What are the characteristics of someone who would succeed in this role? What does the career path for someone in this role look like? What do you like best about working here? So again, you want to make sure to have those 3 to 5 questions ready to roll. You might not ask all of them, and that's okay, but it's better to be prepared and have some questions ready than to just end your interview with, oh, do you have any questions? No, I'm okay. Again, you look more professional and better prepared with with questions ready to go. And again, I'll send that article so you can look it up and just kind of skim through the different questions. They have, I think, close to 100 questions that you can ask. But what I like to do is I just kind of go through the different categories and maybe pick out one, every other category or so, or whichever one that kind of just resonates with me that I think, oh yeah, this would be great to ask an employer. I write it down, and I, for some reason, always tend to take those set of questions with me to every interview, and it's been helpful. Dress. Dress is very important. I feel like COVID has brought on some interesting new habits, I feel like, for many of us. I feel like because many times now with COVID, a lot of things seem to be virtual and we're behind a computer screen and whatnot. Sometimes we get a little too comfortable with that, and it's not always the best to do, especially when you're going to be interviewing. In regards to dress, whether your interview is going to be in person or virtual, I highly suggest that you make sure you put your best foot forward and dress up. My key of them is like, when in doubt, err on the side of formal. You always want to be one notch above the people that you're interviewing with. Again, it does not hurt to be extra snazzy looking the day of your interview. Again, it just shows a level of professionalism. It shows that you care. It just, it speaks volumes without even saying words. So making sure to take note of this. I would highly recommend for the men, wearing a suit in a solid color such as navy, black, or dark gray, kind of the standard. If you don't have like a suit jacket or anything like that, doing a long sleeved, collared shirt with buttons, that always works. If you can do a tie, even better, for sure, during an interview. And then even hairstyle, I mean, just keeping it like together. I feel like we all know the difference between like I just rolled out of bed hair, and I went to the restroom and like, combed my hair and, actually did something to it. So you want to make sure you do the second. For women, you want to make sure, again, same thing, you just dress to the T. A blazer in navy, black, or dark gray, the standard is always, a safe bet. A suit skirt or slacks or dress pants, those work. A coordinated blouse, a solid colored dress, a sweater with slacks. Those are always kind of key things, similar to the men over here. And then with jewelry, less is more. I'm a very big fan of earrings. I love earrings. If anyone knows me, I'm always like decked out in different earrings. But for an interview, less is more. You don't want to draw attention away from you and responses you're giving with maybe flashy things, or like a super big chunky necklace, or like really bright colored earrings that are just adding that pop of color, which it might be super cute and everything, but you don't want to distract from you in the conversation you're having with them. So I found this quote and I thought it was awesome. Channel your inner Meghan Markle for interviews and leave your Lady Gaga inspired outfits for the weekend. Okay. So again, just playing it safe, keeping it professional. And if how you typically dress doesn't conform to the traditional gender norm, no problem. Your interview attire shouldn't have to either. The key with gender specific attire is to find clothing that is polished, professional, and will fit the company you're interviewing with. And for those of you who might say, well, I've kind of looked it up and I saw that the company is a lot more like business casual or just casual. I think regardless, for an interview, go dressed up. After the fact, you can always find out like what the attire is like. You can ask your supervisor or whoever it may be, but for an interview, I would say always kind of go ready to look the role. Let's see here. So here's an example of a smart casual, and this I would stray away from for an interview, but I wanted to give an example of what once you start at an internship, again, depending where you're at, obviously, but once you start an interview, at an internship, and you see if they're like more on the casual side, I have seen people who take casual to the extreme and they'll do like, jeans and t-shirts. And yes, while that is casual, you still want to keep it semi-professional, right? So there's this thing called apparently smart casual, where again, for men, you might not have to wear a tie, or for women, you might not have to wear, I don't know, like dress pants or skirts or anything like that, but you still want to keep it semi-professional. So still put together, but a little more casual, a little, in the smart casual sense, you can add like your pops of maybe jewelry and stuff like that, or again, the non-wearing a tie or khaki stuff like that. But again, still keeping it professional, but casual. This is another example of business casual. Honestly, whatever whatever it is, I honestly feel like you can never go wrong with a blazer. A blazer on top of anything always makes things look better, professional. Blazers are my go-to. Again, if you don't have one, I would definitely make sure you try to get yourself one in at least one of those standard colors that I mentioned, black, navy, or gray. You can never go wrong with having them. But again, business casual, again, a little more dressed up than the smart casual, but still, professional. But for your interview, I would highly recommend business formal. Again, doesn't matter what like the dress culture is at the company that you're applying, just go prepared, looking like $1,000,000. Okay. So again, here were just some visual examples, but I had already mentioned the details. So I'm going to move forward. And one thing to note, be resourceful. You don't need to spend $1,000,000 to look like $1,000,000 or even be ready for your interview. I don't know about you, but many times I have found myself strapped for cash, especially COVID has been very unforgiving. I don't know about the rest of you all, but those COVID pounds, they're starting to seem like those freshman 15 pounds, yeah, I feel like it's like the COVID 15 or 20, or I don't even want to put a number to it. But when you have an interview and let's say something like that has happened, you're like, oh my gosh, I don't have pants that fit, I don't have a shirt that closes, whatever it may be, but I'm strapped for cash. I don't have any, money, or I'm very low on money, or whatever it may be. Don't freak out. Like, there's so many different options that you can look into. So that way you're still ready. If you're strapped for cash, again, don't feel the need to get into debt to dress for an interview. You can go to your local thrift stores. You would be very surprised. Again, I don't know how many people go to thrift stores or anything, but I always like to go and check out things, and you'd be surprised. Some people that donate things, wow, they like nice name brand things that you can find. And again, as long as you have a solid blazer and a button-up shirt, you're good to go. So check out your local thrift stores. If you can't find stuff there, there's also many times, I'm in California, I know we have people joining from different states, but check out local organizations too. There's things like Dress for Success, and I can't think of the other names of the other companies, but there's so many different organizations out there that can also help provide you with, a suit to interview in, or whatever it may be. So, and then last but not least, ask a friend. If you have someone who is like, hey, I can kind of fit into your size, like, hey, can I borrow this for my interview? Again, so don't feel like you have to get into debt to, be ready for your interview. Be resourceful. There are ways to definitely make sure that you still look like $1,000,000 without spending those $1,000,000. Punctuality. This is a big thing too, that all of the employers I talk to notice. And actually, I lie. Let me go back one. Being resourceful and looking the part. This was also one thing that the employers noticed was dress. I had just recently, I think 2 days ago, I was talking to an employer checking in with some of our student interns, and they mentioned that, and by the way, this is not STEM core students, but just another group of students that I work with. And right away, the employer, the supervisor noted to me, oh yeah, I'm not going to lie. This person showed up in jeans and a t-shirt and looking a little disheveled, while this is an internship, and, I want to make this work out, just to let you know, if this were someone else, or if this was a regular type of job interview, I right away would say no. Because again, they just showed up looking like they didn't necessarily they didn't put care into how they're presenting themselves. They just, so they right away noticed that. So again, that's why I really want to make sure that you take note of these things. All these little details do make a difference, and employers do notice. So going forward, punctuality. You want to make sure that you are on time. And when I say on time, I mean early. If you have an online appointment, I can't tell you, even just with STEM core interviews that we've conducted with students, we've had several who are definitely late. And many times it's like, oh, I had an issue with my internet. Oh, I couldn't find the link. Oh, this or that. Oh, or this or that. These interviews that we've conducted have been with, just us and students. But when you have an interview set up with an employer, like, again, they note these things. So if you have an online interview, ensure that all your technology is working ahead of time. Locate your link, test it out if you need to. You don't want any last minute glitches holding up the process. If you know that in your house, in my house, I have like weird dead zones, like I know to avoid those because I know that my internet goes in and out. If you don't have like reliable internet at home, maybe go find somewhere that you can go and set up that you won't have an issue with the internet. So again, just making sure you prepare for this before. And if it's online, whether it's online or in person, you want to make sure you're early. It does not hurt you to show up a couple minutes early and wait in a waiting room on Zoom. Or if you're in person, again, waiting in the waiting room or wherever they have you is not going to kill you. If it's an online appointment, be 5 minutes early. Again, it's better to be safe than sorry. If you're in person, be at least 15 minutes early. Some people actually, I've had interviews where they require me to be half an hour early. So I end up being like 35 minutes early, just in case. And especially if you're driving somewhere and you may not have been there before, you definitely want to make sure you give yourself even extra time to make sure that you can plan for if you're driving for any sort of accidents that may happen or traffic, time to park, time to walk to the location, time to find the location. Again, you don't want to be rushing in, then you're flustered, and then it just kind of throws your groove off track and it really will impact how you interview. So again, give yourself the time. Things to keep in mind. And I just said one of them. These are things that you definitely want to make sure to keep in mind. Employers that we spoke to again also mentioned these things. You want to avoid the ums and uhs. Buy yourself time by repeating the interview's questions back to them if you need a minute to kind of think. It also doesn't hurt to give a minute to respond. You don't want to take like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 minutes in silence. But if you need a second to kind of formulate what you're going to say, then okay, take a minute of silence if you want. But if you're kind of scrambling for what to say, instead of just saying, again, maybe just repeat the question back that they just gave you. That actually might help like trigger, oh yeah, I remember I was going to say this. But again, just you want to avoid those. Keep your answers concise and focused. And I keep saying, oh my goodness, perfect example of what not to do. Keep your answers concise and focused. Your time with each interviewer is limited, so be mindful of rambling. Practicing your answers beforehand can help you keep your focus. I have actually just recently attended an event where they had a speaker, and oh man, I kind of felt for that speaker, because I don't know if it was the nerves that got to them. I don't know if they just didn't prepare. I don't know if they didn't have something written out, but boy, oh boy, there was a lot of rambling. And in this case, the poor speaker, there was like an audience of like 50 people. So the pressure was on, right? In an interview, at least it's just maybe you in the interview or you in like a panel interview with a couple people. But I can tell you, there's no worse thing than rambling, because a lot of times they have, interview after interview after interview after interview scheduled. So if you start rambling and you kind of lose your focus, you may be missing out the opportunity to get to the good nitty gritty meaty parts that you want them to know about you. And they're going to have to actually cut you off and say, you know what, thank you for your time. We actually have another appointment that we have to get to. And then you've just wasted a good chunk of time kind of going off on tangents and rambling. So again, keep that focus. I know that it can be nerve-wracking, but you want to make sure you keep your answers concise. And then respond truthfully to the questions asked. While it can seem tempting to embellish on your skills and accomplishments, interviewers find honesty refreshing and respectable. Remember that employers can possibly test to see if the skills that you noted are actually legit. I don't know. I feel like I have shared this, at least for sure, with my STEM core students, but I don't know if I've shared it with other people. But I remember on one of my resumes, I had put for skills Microsoft Office, but in particular, I had put Excel. And I don't remember if I had put like the level of comfort that I had with that program or not. But when they asked me in the interview, because I didn't realize that that company was very, there was a heavy use of Excel with data and all that stuff that they were doing. And when they asked me in the interview, oh, what's your comfort level with Excel? I was like, oh yeah, I'm comfortable. Like, yeah, not a problem. And then the interviewer who actually asked me was like the head of I don't know what department, asked me, what is the formula for adding a column? Yeah, I was a deer in headlights. I had no idea. So again, if you are familiar with, for example, in my case, I could have said I was familiar with Excel, but a beginner, because again, you don't want to oversell or embellish any sort of skills or accomplishments, because if you do get called out on it, like you might be looking like me, a deer in headlights, or just being embarrassed. Actually, in another interview that I had, I'm a Spanish speaker, so I can read, speak, write in Spanish. And I always list that on, I translate too. And I list that on my resume. And yeah, again, this person, right off, it was actually the last question that they asked me, and they said, you noted on here that you speak Spanish. Can you translate what I'm going to say to you? Thank goodness I know my stuff. So I, repeated word for word, or it was a question that I had to answer, or something of the sort. But I mean, I did what I was asked, because I know my skill capability. But again, just be prepared that employers can possibly test you on the spot for things. So do not embellish, do not lie, but and always clearly state if you're a beginner, or if you've only taken one class or whatever. Let them know that. Don't try to say something that's not true. Other things to keep in mind: be confident. Again, that can be easier said than done, because again, interviewing can be very nerve-wracking. But I would recommend before the interview, if it's virtual, even better, you can be in your wherever space that you are going to be interviewing on the computer. Take a deep breath, exhale slowly to manage feelings of anxiety and encourage self-confidence. If you need to give yourself a pep talk, do it. And just again, try to bring yourself some calmness. And then win them over with your authenticity and positivity. Being genuine during an interview conversations can help employers easily relate to you. Showing positivity with a smile and upbeat body language can help keep the interview light. That's actually one thing that I also got feedback on as well from employers. More than at least 3 employers told me that they were willing to look over skill set, or even level of skills that a student had, over attitude. They focused more so on the attitude. This student seemed like they were eager to learn. This student seems so enthusiastic, and this student just seems so professional, and this student seems so just positive. Every single employer noted that that they were willing to forego skill set over personality, over just attitude. So keep that in mind. I remember years and years and years ago, I had someone tell me about in interviews and stuff, that an employer, and again, this might be more so for just a regular job as opposed to an internship, but I think it can apply anywhere. But they said a lot of times employers, you might have the skill set and everything, but if they get maybe not good vibes from you, or they just see kind of a pessimistic attitude, stuff like that, they take note of this. Many times this person had told me, when I interview people and I decide whether or not I want to hire them, I think to myself, if I was stuck in an airport in a snowstorm with my coworker because we had to go on a business trip, could I get along with this person? Could I stand being trapped in an airport with them for 5 hours, 10 hours, whatever? So again, many times people are willing to overlook skills just because they want to make sure that the person that they're bringing on board, whether it be for an internship or for a job, are going to contribute also to just the environment that they're working in. So keep that in mind. Um, on the opposite of this, well, not the opposite, but on actually the same vein as this, keep negativity out. Don't bring baggage into the interview room. Don't badmouth your former employer or any other companies you've been associated with, and don't complain about your personal circumstances. This is another thing that employers actually pointed out. I had a couple employers tell me that I don't know if it was a question that they asked or the student just shared, but it struck out to them. They said the way that they were explaining things, the student was explaining things about a problem or a mistake or a bad situation they had at work. The student was telling me about the situation, and the only thing that they could think of was the negative aspect of it. They honestly, they said that that's what stuck in their brain the most, is that it sounded like that student, not that they caused conflicts, but that, or that they're troublemakers or anything like that, but the way that the student ended up discussing this, the negative words from that discussion is what stayed in their brains. They said it was kind of hard to focus on anything else that they said after that, because I was more so focused on this negative thing that this person was talking about and the problems that there were here, that kind of overshadowed things. So you want to be careful on how you talk about situations. If you need to talk about a situation where they may ask you like, oh, can you tell me about a time where you had to deal with a problem? Like, always think of a solution that you can handle, or be ready to explain the solution that you created to handle that. Don't ever end it on a negative note. So again, change a negative to a positive. Oh, just kidding. I had the thumb right here. If you have to talk about a challenging situation, you should include a mention of how you may have helped solve it and what you learned that made you a better employee. Okay, so next step. So after the interview, this is where it's your chance to, again, usually ask your questions. So they may say, do you have any questions for us? That's where the questions that I mentioned earlier would come in. But then also feel free to ask about next steps. I think it's it's your right to definitely ask, like, when can I expect to hear back from you? What are the next steps? Or is there anything that I have to do? So either ask the interviewer or hiring manager or recruiter what, would need to be done. And then obviously before your interview ends, in person for sure, or virtually, always show gratitude. Tell them thank you, for the time, for the interview, all that good stuff. And then also sending a letter, an actual handwritten letter, if you can, or if, not a problem. I know that for this situation, especially for like the STEM core internships, you might not have like an actual physical address where you could send something to. Send a follow-up email and just say thank you. Sending a thank you letter or email after your interview for the opportunity and time that the employer is giving you always leaves a good impression and shows professionalism. And actually, I have to give props to students who I have been interviewing, even just for STEM core, for like a round one interview. Many times I've been receiving like thank you emails after, and it's so nice to get them like, wow, you're welcome. Like, it was great talking to you and getting to meet you as well. But it's so nice to receive those emails from students just thanking you for your time. So make sure you do that for the employer as well. So now that I've spoken and given you a lot of information, I wanted to open it up for Q&A. Or even sharing, that's fine too. So if you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask, or if you want to type it in the chat, feel free to do so. Again, this workshop really is for you to be able to put your best foot forward in not just an internship interview, but just any interview in general. So again, feel free to unmute yourself or type your question into the chat. So let's see.
I had a question. I was just wondering, do these internships usually take place in the morning or in the afternoon, or does it vary?
I think it would vary. I'm not, I can't give you like a concrete answer, because I think it would just depend on the employer, what time frames they have and stuff. I know a lot of times they'll ask you like, hey, I know sometimes they will give you options or time slots to pick from. Other times they may just assign you a time, which can be sometimes also flustering as well, because I've had situations where I've applied and I get back the response, oh, you've been selected for an interview. And this is the only day that we have interviews. And these are the times. And there's only a select few times. I just always end up needing to make it work because, again, and I do want to stress that. Thank you for bringing that up. If you do get an interview, try your best to make it work, the time work. You don't want to end up missing an opportunity because you're like, you know what, none of those days or times work for me. I mean, I feel like employers may be willing to work with you, but at the same time, you never know. They might just say, well, unfortunately, these are the only times and days that we have. So if you can't make it work, we'll just have to move on to the next person. So if you can, try to make it work as best possible. But yeah, I think it would be just up to the actual individual employer. Good question though. Any other questions? I see a couple but in case anyone wanted to unmute themselves, then I'll go to the chat. Anyone else? Anyone else? Okay, so I have a couple in the chat. So let me see. I once had an interview where I was told that I was not permitted to give the interviewers any piece of paper or anything else. Yeah, and what I do, because sometimes you never know what the situation is like. What I do is in every interview that I've gone to, I always take my little vanilla folder with me, like kind of like a file folder. I have my copies with me. If they tell me that, which again hasn't happened, but if they tell me, oh, you know what, you can't bring papers in with you, then stick them in my purse or, put them to the side somewhere and that's it. But at least I'm prepared to that if they do allow me, then and even if they already have a copy of your resume, I've always had people tell me like, oh, well, thank you for providing a copy. It just always looks like you're on it, you're ready, you're professional, all that good stuff. So I've always had positive feedback with that. But again, you never know with the employer, but it's always better to be ready than not. And then some questions in your job, what keeps you, so wait, are these questions? It says some questions in your job, what keeps you awake at night? How would you describe the culture of this office? Wait, this is Becca. Would you say these
yeah,
are
no, Myra, yeah, I think she was just adding questions, sample questions
got you
earlier when you were at that point.
Oh, great. No, thank you. Very interesting. Okay, those are, yeah, I've never been asked that. So very interesting. Or have asked those. Okay, cool. And then in Silicon Valley, it's not necessary to be super formal, but you still want to look professional, coordinated, and neat. No sneakers or jeans, button-up shirt and blazer would be good. Some colleges have a clothes closet or of interview clothes. Yes, exactly. So again, especially depending on the industry, employer, stuff like that, you never, once you maybe start there, you're able, or even just doing your own research, like again, checking out like LinkedIn and like pictures they might have of like, employees or like the events that they have or whatever. That always can kind of give you a better idea of what the dress culture is like. But for the interview, just always be prepared, right? Always be prepared. And yeah, definitely a great resource. Thanks for mentioning that, Becca. Some colleges do have a clothes closet for interview clothes. So again, check out local organizations or check with the career center at your campus, see if they offer any of these things for you, because again, you don't have to spend $1 million to be prepared for looking awesome at your interview. Let's see. If an employer says they will contact you within a specific amount of days, let's say 7, and they do not contact you within that time, what do you do? No, saying they will contact you if you got the internship or not. I think if they give you, especially if they give you like a specific amount of days and you haven't heard back, I think it's all in your right to send a follow-up email and just check in, say, hello, I, was just curious, or I wanted to see if there were any updates with my status or, anything like that. I totally think it's completely appropriate to send up a follow-up email because, we're all humans. They might be overwhelmed with stuff and may have just kind of forgot or whatever it may be. But yeah, if it's definitely been more than the a lot of time that they said that they were going to take, I would definitely follow up. Awesome. Thanks, Reggie. I appreciate that. And you know what? You mentioned about the difference between casual and business casual. I also, do Google searches. If you're kind of stumped on like, man, like what should I wear, like how can I pair this up or whatever, do Google searches. Put business casual or business interview stuff. Sometimes when I'm kind of stumped on like what should I wear, that's what I do. Google is my friend. And I also highly recommend try to get your outfit ready beforehand. When I've had interviews, like I said, especially after this lovely like COVID situation, we may have like gotten a little fluffier, and that's totally okay, not an issue. But your clothes might not fit or whatever, right? If that's a situation like it has been for me, you want to make sure like if you need to go and get yourself a blazer that's actually gonna like button up a little or whatever, give yourself time to go and find one, because sometimes stores don't have things, or maybe if you have to order something online, give yourself the time for it to arrive in time. So whatever it may be, or if you have to go to the thrift store, whatever it may be, give yourself time to search for those things. So I would say maybe the moment that you like apply, so especially for all our students right now who have already, their resumes have been submitted, start thinking about like, what can I wear for an interview if I get called? Because again, you don't want to be scrambling at the end and then end up risking like, oh, I don't have anything to wear. What do you think are the major expectations that could be unique for STEM course students? What do you mean by that? Can you expand on that a little? Major, as to what you mean by major expectations that could be unique?
Well, I can try and elaborate. I'm not sure
Yeah.
what the student meant, but hi everybody. This is Cheryl Martinez. I'm also with Growth Sector as a program manager. I guess one thing that's very different with our STEM core internships specifically for STEM core students is we're working with a list of employers who are specifically saying like, yes, we want to bring STEM core students on. They have an understanding of what our program is, right? So the expectation is that you have met your requirements through our program, right? So that means that you are calculus ready, you've attended these workshops that your support specialists have put on, that you've done like your one-on-ones and like all of those pieces, but being able to speak to that as well. So for a lot of you guys, I think many of our students are probably like in maybe their first or second year at the college, which is totally fine, that you're maybe just getting to calculus or just past calculus. But being able to speak to like what you've done in your courses. If you've taken technical hands-on classes like intro to engineering and intro to programming classes, projects that you've worked on in like your robotics class, those are the things that you need to speak to. So I think a common misconception from some of our students is that like, oh, like I am not a graduating student from like a four-year university, so I don't have any experience. You do. And you have to be able to think about, and that's what one thing Myra and I do with a lot of our students when we talk to you guys in interviews, is like pull on those projects that you're working on. Talk about what you did in your classes, because those are all valuable experiences that our employer partners like want to hear about. So make sure that you're sort of like starting to brainstorm about like that project that you did that you're really proud of, like that trebuchet that you put together in your engineering class, and be able to speak to those points.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head, Cheryl. Thank you for talking about that. Again, just being ready, going over, prepping through your skill set. Again, a lot of times we get students who tell us like, oh, I don't really have skills. Again, looking at your courses that you've gone through, projects that you've worked on, just be ready to talk about those things. So if you need to make notes for yourself and just, go over them, like as if you were studying for a test, go over them. So that way, when you are in this interview, you can speak to these things and not, kind of look like a deer in headlights and not know exactly what to say. So thank you for that. Any other questions?
Yeah, and one thing,
Yeah.
I was gonna say, just don't assume that they know like what you've done or what you're doing. Like even though like a lot of our employer partners have an understanding of our program and know that like you're taking trigonometry and maybe you're taking hands-on class, let's just assume they don't know and speak to it. And I think that's something that's key that Myra and I are like, after an interview, we'll talk to students and say like, hey, like you have like X, Y, and Z on your resume. Like, how come you didn't talk about it? Or I know you're student support specialist, and I know that you all did this activity. That's something that you should have talked about. So just remembering that piece of it as well.
Exactly. Yay. Thank you so much. So any other questions before we end the workshop?
I've got a quick question.
Yeah.
Is there any way to access, like, say for the future you want to look at this presentation, is there any way to access this?
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to be sending the recording and also, again, some links to some resources that I used I'll be sending it to your support specialist, to whoever that is. So that way you can look back on it. And, again, if you need to take notes or whatever, we will be sending this out. So no worries.
Okay, for sure. Thank you.
Of course. Any other questions? We good? Okay. If for whatever reason you're like me, you're like me, and then you have questions that come up after, and you're like, gosh darn it, why didn't I ask this? Feel free to email me. I'm more than happy to connect with you, or feel free to, email your support specialist, ask them questions. We're more than happy to connect with you. And, again, just kind of even help prep you if you'd like. So I hope you all enjoyed this. Again, this was for our students, so that way you can, again, put your best foot forward and be successful. So thank you so much for joining. I appreciate your time, and have a lovely weekend. Bye, everyone.